Good afternoon. I'm Bob Ames, and one of my jobs at Calvin University is I'm the director of the Calvin Center for Innovation in Business. And we're glad that you could join us today for our 9th annual Calvin Business Partners Awards event. And before we begin, I just want to thank all of our sponsors whose support allows us to make this event happen year after year. This year, our event sponsor is In On Time, and In On Time is a warehouse and logistics supplier out in Zeeland, Michigan, and we're just so grateful for their support. Our table sponsors this year include Plant Moran, Zeeland Lumber and Supply Company, Kent Companies, Macatawa Bank, Vibration Research, James and Andrea Karsten, Blue Wave Financial Partners, the West Michigan Community Bank, and Dorner Works. So thanks to all of our table sponsors and to all of the many guests that they've got participating in this virtual event today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Calvin University's president, Dr. Michael Leroy, who will share a few words and open this event in prayer. Dr. Leroy.
Thanks a lot, Bob. And thank you to our sponsors as well. Well, I wish you all a good afternoon on behalf of all of us at Calvin University. We're really grateful that you could join us for this Business Partners Award Luncheon. And I wish we could be together with you in person, although I am grateful for the technology that enables us to gather virtually today to honor the businesses and individuals who partnered with Calvin University and our business programs to encourage students as emerging Christian leaders. As president of Calvin University, I have been strengthened in my belief that the enduring knowledge, skills, and Christian virtues developed by a business education grounded in the liberal arts provide an excellent preparation for life. In both the workplace and in education, we succeed when we serve and lead others as whole people. To overlook the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual dimensions of a person or others is to miss important opportunities to learn to grow. A Calvin education nurtures the character of our students as whole people who leave here ready to wholeheartedly serve their families, churches, communities, and organizations like yours. Thank you for the role that you play in making this kind of heart and mind education possible for today's Calvin students, who are tomorrow's business and organizational leaders. This afternoon, we will learn about the launch of the Calvin University School of Business, fueled by the generosity of an anonymous donor who provided the largest gift in Calvin's history. The donor's hope and prayer is that this gift is a catalyst for others, inspiring further investments in the business program and in the overall programs and mission of Calvin University. Today, we also celebrate our Outstanding Corporate Partner Award recipient. And finally, it is a joy for us to welcome Calvin alumnus and renowned psychologist Bryan for a Q&A session based on his keynote address today. In all the years we've held this event, we've never experienced it like this. And yet I'm hopeful that even as we yearn for face-to-face community, this event will also bring unexpected blessings, allowing you to participate from your personal workspace or wherever you find yourself as you eat lunch as part of this global Calvin community. To our event and table sponsors, again, I thank you for your investment and for your willingness to make an in-person event of virtual reality. To each of you who've joined us, we are grateful for you and grateful for your support. Your impact is far-reaching and deeply appreciated. Now I invite you to join me in prayer, as it is our tradition. God, over all things, every office, every industry, every idea yet to be conceived, thank you for the opportunity to celebrate in the ways which you are at work. You taught us to create, to work, to serve others, and to create opportunity for all in your creation that you've made. We thank you, God, for the gifts, skills, and capacities that you've given every person gathered here and to our students. And we pray for our students as we work with them that they would be formed more fully in your image and seek to live out those gifts, skills, and capacities in their respective callings. We thank you, God, for making this gathering possible. We thank you for Calvin University and for our employer partners this day. In all things, we give honor and glory to you in the name of Christ. Amen. And it's now my pleasure to welcome Associate Deans Tom Betts, Marilyn Stansbury, and Bob Ames to share an update on the new Calvin University School of Business. Thank you.
Well, our thanks again to John Amash and the team at Tekton who won that award. It really has been exciting to watch them grow over the years in their partnership with us, and we so appreciate everything that they've done. And if any of you are interested in sponsoring CAP projects or working with us in our employer partner program, feel free to contact either myself or Stephanie or anybody here at Calvin, and they'll get you connected. And again, thanks to the team at Tekton for their support. I'm excited now to introduce our keynote speaker. As President Leroy said, Bryan Dick is a proud graduate of Calvin University. And he's a man that plays many roles, wears many hats. Bryan is not only a husband and a father to 4 sons, but he's a professor of psychology at Colorado State University. He's also a businessman. He's the co-founder and chief science officer of Jobsology, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more during the Q&A session. Bryan makes his work as a researcher to study meaning and purpose in the workplace, and he also studies calling and vocation and career development, and importantly for us too, that intersection of faith and work. And I'd be remiss in my responsibilities if I didn't hold up a copy of his new book, which it's called Redeeming Work, and many of you are receiving copies of this as part of your registration for this event. Bryan's coming us today from his home in Fort Collins, Colorado, and what we've asked him to do is to summarize in just a few minutes his keynote for us. It'll be a reminder for those of you that took time to watch it, and maybe it'll be a tease for those of you who haven't seen it yet. We'll give you a chance to see it after the event. But after Bryan summarizes his keynote, then we'll engage in a Q&A session, a discussion about his talk. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Bryan Dick. Bryan?
Thank you so much, Bob, and I just want to express my gratitude for the invitation to be part of this event. Calvin University means a great deal to me and has been formative in my own journey, and so anytime my alma mater asks me to do something, I'll pretty much always say yes. I'm privileged to have a chance to share, first of all, just a quick summary of my earlier remarks, and I got to hand it to Bob. Earlier this week, he said, Bryan, I watched your keynote more than once, and I took notes. And I took notes in the form of PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to share those with you. I hope I captured everything. And, of course, he totally nailed it, and those slides are the ones I'll be using to talk through these remarks. So I shared a little bit about how this year has been a real challenge with everything that's been going on, most notably the pandemic. And so, you know, whether the change this year is unprecedented in history, I'm not sure, but for many of us, the level of change we've endured has been unprecedented, at least in our lifetimes. And I shared how some of the change that we've experienced has been complete, and other change for quite a while, but COVID has served as an accelerant for it. Either way, we're trying to navigate this landscape where everything feels different and also like a moving target. And so I started by addressing the individual worker, saying, what can you do to navigate this kind of rapid change? And of course, doing so well requires a great deal of resilience, and a lot of us are building resilience as we manage this period of time. But the one skill I think that is super important is to develop career adaptability. It's a readiness and resources, set of resources for coping with this kind of change. It involves a learning orientation, a willingness to learn new things, to roll with the punches, and to develop a capacity for doing what's required in order to meet the demands even in different ways than we've had to meet them before. One of the things that hasn't changed, though, is what work means to people. And people still want their work to make sense. They want it to matter. They want it to have some positive impact in the world. They want to align with what's most important to them in life. And I shared a little bit about this model from a social psychologist named Crystal Park, where, our daily experiences, day in and day out of our job, we want these to be not compartmentalized or sealed off from what matters most to us, our worldview commitments, our beliefs, our goals, our values. Rather, we want them to be in sync, to be in alignment. And organizations can get in the way of that, or they can facilitate that. Of course, for believers, our global meaning frameworks, our worldviews are defined by what's communicated in Scripture, God's grand design for the world. And a big part of the book, Redeeming Work, and a big part of that talk I shared is the kind of four-act story of Scripture: creation, fall, redemption, and renewal. And, the questions that emerge from that model to help us understand how what we're doing with our lives in all domains, but certainly including work, how that what that has to do with what God is doing in the world. So we know God created everything and declared it good, and God gave us some work to do here. And so a question we can ask is, how is my work rooted in God's design for the world? And in terms of the fall, we know that things became distorted. And we can ask ourselves, what does that mean for the work that I'm doing right now? And then in terms of redemption and renewal, our question is, what does it mean to work in new creation hope? And at this point in the talk, I hit the pause button and said, well, what does that mean for organizations? Remember, organizations can hinder this process for people, or it can facilitate them and make things easier. And there were three practical points that I shared or offered up as a response to this question. The first one, I have to say, I was almost reluctant to include it because it seemed so obvious, but it's taking your organization's mission and ensuring that people understand what it is and exploring with them how that mission aligns with their own process of connecting what they do to their broader sense of purpose. But it does seem important to reiterate, it's probably something like exercise and sleeping well. We know it's good for us, but oftentimes when things get crazy, really important things end up on the back burner. So reinforcing that mission is critical. A second was connecting employees within an organization to the people who benefit from their work. And I shared a study by Adam Grant and kind of the powerful impacts that even having limited exposures to people who benefit from the work, the impact that can have both on how productive people are, but also how meaningful they experience the work. And then the third practical suggestion is these role conversations. How well do people's job responsibilities align, and the greater the alignment and purpose people experience in the work? And so that's kind of a brief summary of what we talked about. If you haven't had a chance to watch the remarks in full, I hope you do before we move on to the rest of life. But at this point, I'll pause, and I think Bob is facilitating our question and answer period.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Boy, that was a good quick summary, and I appreciate it. It again made me think more of the keynote. So I hope all of our guests today, if you haven't had a chance to watch the full keynote, we'll have the whole event recorded and available to you for reviewing, and we'll also make sure that you get a new link to the keynote address. And I really encourage you to give it a listen. It seems like it speaks to a lot of our experience today, especially in the midst of all of the turbulence and the change that we're facing. So I found it very helpful, and I hope you do too. We've got a number of questions that were sent in by people who watched the keynote, and I'm going to start off with the first one, which is really targeting your first recommendation. And your first recommendation for ways that our organizations can kind of help connect things for our employees is really focusing on mission and making our missions clear and making it sure that they're more than just words on a piece of paper. Can you share with us an example or two of organizations that you believe do this exceptionally well?
Sure. I mean, there are a couple of low-hanging fruit for folks that live in Northern Colorado here, and maybe I'll talk about those. I think part of what I'll just highlight is, when I talked about that in the keynote, I asked the question, if I showed up at your organization or Zoom bombed a team meeting that's happening virtually and asked people, what is your mission? Would they be able to tell it to me? And both of these organizations, when you interact with people who work there or you show up there, that's all they can talk about. So the first one that comes to mind is New Belgium Brewing Company. And, New Belgium has been around since the 90s and they make craft beer, but they're pioneers of the triple bottom line, people, planet, profit. And so they have this mission that's partly about their craft operation. 1% of their profits goes to environmental causes, but it's not just donating a portion of the resources. They've completely reworked their infrastructure so they're 100% wind-powered. They have these giving back initiatives with community grants, in-kind donations, and they really view themselves as a company as advocates and leaders within their industry for these kinds of initiatives. And it's not just part of their identity and part of what they put on their website, but if you showed up there and took their tour, it's all you can hear. It's all they talk about. That ethos is everywhere. It's the first thing people mention. And it's part of their regular practice. They reinforce it in every training, in every company gathering, and people are attracted to work there because of that mission, because of that, because of an obsession with beer maybe, but more than that, because of the way they frame the work they do as a force for good, as business as a force for good. OtterBox has a mission. We grow to give. So, OtterBox, they make these cases to protect devices. And so it's a big deal to them to have super high quality cases. They say they want to be the most trusted device protection company, have the most trusted device protection products in all the categories where they compete. But they do that through relationships. And the mantra they keep coming back to is, we grow to give. And so here their emphasis at OtterBox is on building an ethic of giving. And they do this in lots of ways. For example, if you start as an employee there, you have as an employee benefit 24 hours a year of paid time that you are urged to spend volunteering. They have an Otter Cares Foundation that reinvests in communities, especially in education and youth. And so, here too, this message is such a strong part of their regular operations, their regular way of doing business and interacting with their employees, that people really buy into it, and it helps them retain people who work there, but also attract people who really find that inspiring and want to be with. Both of these companies have pretty generous benefits packages for employees, despite somewhat lower pay than people might find elsewhere. They really focus on treating their employees with dignity. That's a key starting point. It's a key foundation for generating buy-in to these broader missions. If people feel exploited, then it's critical to have some kind of broader mission. When they feel like they're treated with dignity, it really gives them a lot of motivation to buy into what the organization is trying to do and to connect their own values to that. So those are two examples in my neck of the woods that come immediately to mind.
Thanks, Bryan. I appreciate that. I was fortunate enough to hear one of the employees of OtterBox do a presentation at a business event that I was at, and it was it just struck me that their values were so strong and so consistent with everything they did. And I love it that they sort of follow that age-old wisdom of preaching the gospel always, and when necessary, use words, right? I mean, it was not evident at all in their presentation or on their website that they're believers, but they certainly are living out the gospel and living out their faith the way they run their business. So thanks for that example. Another question that we got, you started talking about that personal connection. This viewer wrote in and said, I feel called to my work, and I see ways that I am helping in God's renewal project, that 4-act scriptural narrative. But people at my church do not see my work or any business in this way. What can I do to help them understand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting, there is this, I talk about this a little bit in the book, there is this faith and work movement that's been building for a couple of decades within the evangelical world. But one of the things, I noted this in the keynote as well, one of the things that emerges from it is that for a lot of Christians, there's kind of a narrow view as to how faith intersects with work, and it's really focused on personal discipleship and evangelism, and both of those things are super important. But that broader creation, fall, redemption, renewal, and the way, the person asking this question put it, in kind of working in God's renewal project, it's so animating, it's so enriching, it adds so much meaning. And I think the way to share this with people who may not necessarily see things the same way is probably the way we share anything with fellow believers who maybe have a different lens or a different perspective on things. It's recognizing as believers in Christ, we're all in this together, right? So living these things out requires engaging in conversation. Wherever there may be some disagreement or potential for approaching things from different angles, I think a wise strategy is just simply share your own experience, share what questions you think are the important ones to address and to explore when it comes to your own faith and how that intersects with the work that you do. And then invite other people to share their perspective, maintain a learning orientation, maintain some intellectual humility, and model that for other people. We don't want to beat people over the head with a particular perspective, but rather just share our own experiences about what it's like to recognize our role as agents of renewal, and to think about what we're doing in whatever sphere God's entrusted to us as part of God's renewal project. I mean, my heart rate increases when I start talking about this because it's so energizing and exciting to me. And I think even, usually when people don't quite see things that way, it's because they haven't really considered or thought it through that way. And, whether they end up agreeing or disagreeing, they'll at least hopefully get a sense of the power that has in my own life. And so for the person asking this question, if they experience that same kind of enthusiasm, I think people find that infectious. So it's just a way, an encouragement to share that with folks with humility, but also with genuineness.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. A great answer. It sounds like you're teeing up definitely some deeper and more meaningful conversations than just sort of discussing the weekend sporting events or the sporting events we wished had happened on the weekend. But thinking about sharing stories too. Somebody else asked a question. It was related to that second point in your recommendations, which is really about making sure that you connect your employees or help them be connected, no matter what job they've got, to the beneficiaries of their work, to your customers, to other people that are positively affected by the work. What are the most effective ways that you've found that organizations and other leaders are able to share those stories and make those connections?
Well, and part of it, Jobsology, we have a small team. So maybe we have a little more flexibility than might be the case with a large corporation. But every meeting, we start with positive customer feedback. What have we heard from the people we serve that helps us recognize that, you know, we're doing something that has value. And so when each of us gets emails with this kind of feedback, we send it along to the person who leads that meeting, and that person collects those and kind of curates those, and then we start the meeting with that, and it kind of sets the tone for that weekly team meeting. So that's one way that we've done it that works, and that's super easy. Another way that's required a little bit more effort, but that's been even more powerful, is our CEO, Travis Hevelone, has on several occasions kind of surprised us with a 10-minute period at the end of the meeting where he's invited one of our clients, or even, you know, a lot of Jobsology's products are delivered in the form of site licenses at colleges and universities, students who have experienced a little bit of what we've built, you know, who are handpicked by the folks at our client organization. And just 10 minutes, they've just shared what they've learned about themselves from interacting with our products, and how that's kind of set them on a different path, which is great. And so, you know, this is through a Zoom call. They don't come in person, although that would be amazing if we could make that happen easily. But those are both, you know, not costly, beneficially feel like they're off because of the way they're with what you're producing. Then I mean, I just can't tell you how much joy that infuses within, you know, for the rest of the day, for that team, the rest of the week. And so, you know, the example I shared in the talk, these are really easy things to do. They don't overthink it. If you have a big corporation, maybe it would require, you know, assigning somebody the role of collecting these and then curating them and then making them available in different ways, or in smaller, you know, unit team meetings or whatever. Obviously, you know, it requires a little bit of creativity to think about what the best way is given your local situation on the ground. But I guess the takeaway would be, don't overthink it. Just figure out ways to connect people within your organization to the beneficiaries of the product or service that you're rolling out.
Great suggestions. I think I'd like to sign up for that job of collecting positive customer feedback and transmitting it. I mean, talk about a giant happy pill at the beginning of a meeting, right?
Fun. It's great.
Yeah, and very energizing, as you say. And thinking about that, we did get a question. I mean, it is, as you mentioned early on, we're just dealing with a lot of change, and change causes stress, whether it's, you know, the pandemic or just kind of the ongoing change that was kind of at play ahead of the pandemic, or even now. I mean, gosh, you're out in Colorado, and you told me about your drive back from down in Denver the other day, where you were getting a blizzard, and in addition to that, you've got two of the largest wildfires in the history of the state of Colorado burning around you. And if there was ever a time where people are just feeling stress, this is it. And as employers and coworkers who are trying to live our lives of work and faith together as agents of renewal, what are some of the roles that we should be playing and trying to help our employees or just our colleagues in dealing with all this stress?
It's a great question. I'd say help ourselves too. I mean, part of it is have compassion on people. Just recognize and name what we're all going through, and that I think means self-compassion too. I mean, this compassion or the pandemic fatigue and all of the challenges, you know, that we're enduring. I think it just, a lot of times we get discouraged because we're not as productive as we need to be, or as we expected we ought to be. And, you know, I think it's important to take a step back and say, look, we're all doing the best that we can. I don't know that there's a magic answer to this question. It's really sort of being human and, providing people with encouragement and support. Basic stuff like that goes a long way. Obviously, flexibility is really important. So, when people have kids and school because of a positive test is now at home, working out a way for people to do their work while navigating the home front. I mean, all of that is just part of the adaptations that we're all required to do. I will say, in the face of uncertainty, transparency is really helpful. It's also the respectful thing to do. And I just give another shout out to our CEO at Jobsology when things hit with the pandemic and we were sort of bracing for some turbulent times. He shared spreadsheets of the financials. This is what we're coming in. These are our monthly costs. What we're dealing with. I just want everybody to be on the same page. I don't want to hide anything from anyone. Now, again, we're a small team, so you can go into that level of detail and that level of transparency. But, whatever your situation is, there's a version of that makes sense, and that's the humane and respectful thing to do with the folks that you employ and work with. The last thing I'll say in response to this, we, especially as believers, we have this sense of hope. And I don't mean hope that the next contract will come through or that Congress will, and, the White House and so forth will get their act together and pass another round of triple P resources or whatever. I mean this kind of big picture eternal hope, which I think modeling that an attitude of having that kind of new creation hope helps people even, put even painful uncertainty into a broader kind of perspective. And I realize you don't want to be preachy or trite in how you manage this, but a few years back, we hosted a missionary family who was traveling through Fort Collins just for one night. But I was talking with the dad, and he shared with how one of their kids had a problem with anxiety, and how at night when he's putting them to bed, this little, his kid would say, Daddy, I have this fear that someone's going to sneak in and kill me. And it's just what's horrifying. I think the knee-jerk reaction as a parent is to say, oh, no, we'll keep you safe. That's not going to happen, which is very natural. But what this dad said was, that's really, really unlikely. But if that happened, you would be with the Lord. You would be in the safest place you could possibly imagine. Go to sleep imagining yourself with Jesus. And I'm not saying that this is something you should tell employees, but I'm sharing this story because that stuck with me. It was this example of this dad having his mind on this eternal hope and trying to provide some assurance for his child in a way that sure addresses the immediate concern, but that shifted focus from the immediate concern to this broader kind of eternal perspective. It requires some translating in order to make that work in an organizational setting. But I think modeling that kind of hope can be really powerful.
Thanks for that, Bryan. I just got another question, this one from somebody who's listening today. They said, what first steps would you recommend to someone who is trying to understand their calling and consider a different job option that might be more fulfilling?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I shared a bit about my journey in the book, and part of the missteps I think I took, and I spent a lot of time in prayer, but the type of prayer that I was engaging in was praying for a divine revelation. God, give me the answer. What should I do? Is it option A or B or C? And the more you study this whole question, how do we discern God's will of direction, the more you recognize that the best thing to pray for is probably wisdom. And then, what does it mean to engage in wisdom in making these kinds of decisions? And one of the things we know from vocational psychology is individual differences, characteristics that make us unique, our interests, our values, our personality, and then think through, given how I'm unique, what does that mean in terms of, my current path that I'm on, and also alternative paths? And is there a better fit for me? And, if so, what would that look like if I were to make a change? I mean, one of the things that we know, even way before COVID, change was rapidly becoming the norm. And people back in 2012 were talking about 4-year careers. And so these kinds of changes and adjustments are very much the norm. The question is, how do I navigate this with wisdom? So prayerful discernment, praying for wisdom, and then paying attention to what your gifts are and then what needs there are in the world and how that intersects with opportunities. I guess that's more than just one step, but that forms, I think, a very powerful framework for thinking through how to navigate these types of questions about what is God's calling for me within my career.
Thanks, Bryan. I'll just tee it up here too. I think one of the things that I found incredibly helpful for those of you that did get a copy of Bryan's book as part of your registration. Again, that's the book. Huh? Do I get points for holding it up twice now? One of the things that I've found in here, and I guess I'm kind of one of those assessment geeks. I love trying to learn a little bit more about myself and others through a lot of the strong, reliable and valid assessments that are out there. And of course, Jobsology, the company that you helped co-found, has Pathway U, and everybody that has this book has access to Pathway U and the assessments that are there, which are also very helpful. So not only can they engage in that prayer for wisdom and be thinking about their own giftedness and about where the world's needs and kind of your passions and desires intersect, but there's some practical tools in there. Maybe you take a minute and talk about some of those.
Sure. What we tried to create was an online career assessment system that captured a lot of what happens in a career counseling engagement, but that packages it in a way that allows people to experience it from whatever device they want to use. So the version of Pathway U that Redeeming Work readers have access to, you log in, create a profile, you take a set of assessments, interests, so what you enjoy, values, what's important to you within a work environment, personality, workplace culture, preferences. We've worked very hard to make those as short as we can possibly make them while still conforming to our high standards of reliability and validity. So it takes about 20 minutes to take those. And then you can dig into the results, learn a bit about, your gifts, and gifts defined at least in terms of these 4 things that we assess. But then we take that information and we apply some algorithms that will predict some career paths that align well with your unique profile. So we have this career match tool that you can spend some time exploring. It's not going to tell you what you should do with your life, but it will give you some information that will help you make informed choices based on kind of the best that we can pull together from the science of vocational psychology. And then there's a toolkit that you can click on, this tab in there that says tools, and there's all kinds of resources to inform a job search. But if you scroll to the bottom of that page, there's also a workbook. You can download this PDF workbook, and that's a series of questions that helps you pull out themes from your results that, again, can be part of a decision decision-making process that in that work helps you to identify other people in your life who you can kind of lean on for support and for mentoring as well. You can think of that as like a personal board of directors serving for your decision-making process, just like a company's board of directors would for the organization. And I'll just say one last thing about it. By the way, thanks for that plug. You might be wondering, is this something that's really only helpful for young adults? I mean, I'm mid-career, but the answer is yes. I mean, the things that we assess have been demonstrated to be highly stable, to not change much on average over time, and so it's useful for folks in the mid-career. And we partnered with AARP a few years back and piloted a version with retirees or with people who are considering retirement as a way to help navigate, the question of what am I going to do on the other side of that transition. So it really is designed, although a lot of the tools are specifically focused on young adults because of the developmental relevance of those questions for those folks. The basic process is useful for the entire lifespan. And so anyway, I do hope that, if you've received the book, or otherwise just go to redeemingwork.pathwayu.com and you can access it that way. And just give it a try, see what you think.
Great. Thanks, Bryan. We're running out of time. I think we do have time to squeeze in one more quick question, though, and it combines. We just got this one from somebody through our chat board, and it connects to another question that we had as well. So I think it's worth taking a minute to answer this. And it's really getting at that whole call that you had about having the employee fit conversation, I think. And here's the question. It says, in your talk, you discussed the importance of helping people move forward, with which I wholeheartedly agree. However, how do we help employees who fear transitioning or moving on, but feel they've exhausted their gifts in their current role? They're ready for something new, but there's no progression in the current organization or in their area. What kinds of recommendations or suggestions would you have for people in that situation?
Well, that fear is real. It's common. It's also really important to work to overcome that. So hopefully your organization creates opportunities for people to kind of extend to their growth edges. But I get that there may well be a point where somebody is ready for something else that your organization just is not in a position where that can be provided. And I can tell you a quick story related to this because this is a big part of Jobsology's mission, to help people understand their gifts and then find pathways for expressing that in ways that make the world better. I mean, we hired a few years back an industrial organizational psychologist, master's level person, fresh out of the master's program, young woman, extremely talented. I mean, just phenomenal. And she came to us eager to design studies, to run analytics, and we just turned loose. She did that, and she built these case examples and collected data that showed impact, and we leveraged that in our marketing and all that. It was great. But at a certain point, our needs shifted. And so we kind of invited her to take on some training responsibilities and customer onboarding and all of that stuff. And she did that because she's a team player and she was great at it, but she just didn't really love it and really needed to get back into a science mode. Designing something. So we looked at opportunities for her to do that, but it quickly became apparent to us that she really needed to be part of a bigger entity that had a bigger R&D budget, where she had, if she stayed with us, it would just sort of be limiting to her given the level of talent that she brought. And so, we said, look, we've got some contacts with those types of companies. Let's see what we can work out. And so we sort of like mutually decided to help steer her toward a new opportunity. Now, obviously, you have to be, we wouldn't have sent her to a direct competitor. So you have to be smart and but we knew that there was a place for her that would allow her to kind of move to the next level in her own career. And we hopefully, I think she would say now she doesn't work for us anymore, but we smoothed that path for her. And when she talks about her time with Jobsology, she's like brimming with gratitude for it. And that makes us feel good. I mean, it makes us feel like we did good by her. You know, we honored our commitment to her in terms of providing her with opportunities to express her talents, even though it got to a point where it just became clear that wasn't going to be with us. So it was like bittersweet. You know, we were really sad to lose her, but we replaced her with somebody who was very well gifted to do to do training and customer onboarding, and that's working out great. So, you know, we try to find these win-win kinds of scenarios, and it takes a little creativity and some doing, but, you know, I think what's clear there is a commitment to the covenant you have with each of your employees.
Yeah, I like that. You're honoring that covenantal relationship, and it's a little harder, but it sounds like the win-win is always worth it. Well, we're running up on the end of our time, and I just so appreciate your engaging in this conversation today, Bryan. And boy, I appreciate your work and your book, and we'll make sure we get a link out there to the website for everybody that was registered today too. So thank you again for all your support. And now I'm going to turn it over to Rick Truer, our director of the Calvin Alumni Association. He's going to close this out today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bob. And I'm so happy to be with you today. And thanks again for partnering with Calvin, Bryan, on all the work that you're doing. And we're so grateful for the support that you've given to the business department and to our students as well. And I'd like to again thank the sponsors for today's event for being willing to help support us on our virtual event this year, and for supporting Calvin University and the business department. Just a reminder that today's presentation is being recorded and we will be sent out to attendees later this week. And just a couple of reminders of ways that you can engage with Calvin beyond today's lunch. There's as you can see on the screen right now, there's the Employee Partnership Program. And if you'd like to learn more about that, make sure you contact our Career Center and talk to Trita Johnson. Her email and Travis Gibbons' email is on there as well. And then we also have coming up the January series. It's going to be all virtual this year. And we are looking forward to being able to let everybody watch this wherever they are on whatever device they have. It's going to be a new version for us this year, but we're excited about our lineup, and we encourage you to check out all the speakers. You can see those at calvin.edu/January. And then we also have our CAP program. And if you've got a project that you would like to interact with Calvin students on, we encourage you to contact the business department and engage them in that way. And on the alumni office side of things, we're working on a new business directory. We're putting together for alumni who are owners of their own business. We'd like to include you in our new business directory. You can send an email to alumni@calvin.edu, or you can check out our benefits and services page on the alumni website, so you can find out more about that as well. Congratulations again to our award winners. Thank you so much for your partnership, and thanks to all our sponsors, and thanks again to everyone for participating today. Have a great week.